everybody, welcome back to another episode of Global Fund Voyage, where we help you navigate through the world of investments and market insights. Today, we're doing a very special episode. We're all dressed in National Day colours. It's our SG60 and about Singapore. So today, I have with me Marcus. Marcus, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. For those who don't know, I'm Marcus, and today we are celebrating SG60. It's an incredible milestone. Kind of celebrates where and how we have came so far, and also looking ahead where we're going next in terms of the next maybe another 60 years.
That's right.
So joining us today for this very special episode, we have Kenneth. Kenneth from Nikko Asset Management. Kenneth, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Thanks, Juliana. Thanks, Marcus. It's good to be back. And I am a senior portfolio manager working in Nikko Asset Management. I cover Singapore equities, and I'm very glad to be here to share about our passion for SG60.
Okay, so Kenneth, maybe we can start with the big picture. As Singapore celebrates its 60th year, what comes to mind when you reflect on the country's economic transformation over the decades?
Well, it's a very good question, and I recall answering a very similar question back in SG50, and that was 10 years ago. And one perspective that I think stood out for me at that time was really what was shared then by our former MAS director, which is Ravi Menon, and he actually captured Singapore's economic transformation over the past 50 years. And he divided that into three distinct periods. He said that the first 20 years post-1965 were defined by what we call export-led industrialization. The following 20 years then marked the next phase towards modern services and liberalization. And the current phase, which is right now spanning the 20 years that we are currently in, is really characterized by what we call productivity-led growth, which is slower but higher quality growth that Singapore is experiencing, focusing on sustainable development. And I believe that's really what is interesting for us as we step into this SG60 narrative. What also strikes me as very important for Singapore is how it has adapted to the current economic climate. For example, we have transformed our domestic services industries, particularly many sectors that we may think about: healthcare, education, tourism, are actually very successful in Singapore, and they've been exported also globally. So as investors, we celebrate SG60. For us, we celebrate Singapore's economic transformation to a first world economy, a service-based economy, and that one that serves us really as a conduit to the rest of this world.
Kenneth, you talked about internally, but what about externally compared to developed markets and its regional peers? What makes Singapore stand out?
Right.
From an investor's perspective?
I believe Singapore is really exceptional in its ability to evolve, and the strength of what we call the service ecosystem has really been a testament of Singapore's success. Today, we see Singapore as a first-class, even a world-class economy, supported and anchored by what we believe to be a very successful, robust financial ecosystem. We also see very interesting growth hubs. For example, in the area of transportation, in the area of infrastructure. And we think that that's also a testament of Singapore's strength. So I think when you look at what's really unique in Singapore, it has been its ability to adapt, its ability to maintain a leading position in the global economy despite rising geopolitical headwinds. The Singapore equity market is a bit different from the economy. The Singapore equity market is unique in its actual composition. It's home to many good blue chip companies. We know many of the financial service companies, but we also believe that Singapore has very good quality companies in industrials. And these are companies we believe that offer very strong sustainable growth and returns for investors, as well as positive change for investors looking to invest in the long term. And if you think about Singapore over the past 3 and 5 years, I'm actually quite proud because in the last 3 to 5 years, Singapore equities have delivered very high quartile or top quartile returns for investors. Can you think about when we look at returns, usually we use the term total shareholder returns or TSR. On a 5-year TSR basis, Singapore has generated 15.9% in returns, ending June of 30th, which is just last week, over 5 years. And this is actually almost in line with the S&P returns of about 16.6%. So we actually see that Singapore has actually been a very good stock market to invest in. Very good double-digit returns that they've generated for investors over the past 5 years, which is actually very exceptional in our view.
Then looking ahead, where do you see the next wave of growth coming from Singapore? Any exciting themes or any sectors that excites you?
I think what is interesting for us in Singapore at this moment is really the modern services sector. When we call modern services, we're referring to really services that are very essential to Singapore. So financial services, think of Singapore as a leading global financial hub. Wealth management, private banking, asset management. These are sectors that we think have actually distinguished Singapore a lot more superior compared to the region. And we think that will also be reinforced going forward. We also believe that it's a region that has very strong backing from reputation for its stability, innovation, and connectivity. There are other service sectors that we also like, and this is really more aligned towards Singapore's strength as an area of exports. So when you think about services, we also consider the area of transportation, the area of industrials and utilities. And these are sectors that we believe that will also continue to do very well for Singapore and to drive growth going forward as well.
Kenneth, let's maybe pivot to the global picture.
Sure.
Okay? Singapore seems to have a lot going on, but with the volatility that's happening in today's markets, whether it's geopolitical tensions, inflation, or even interest rates, how do you see Singapore's role evolving both regionally and globally?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Marcus. It's a bit ironic because Singapore has always been known to be a good safe haven. And I think post-Liberation Day, which was a couple of months ago, its status as a safe haven actually going from strength to strength. So Singapore has traditionally been known to be a safe haven, defensive economy underpinned by good government, strong financial reserves. And I think what has happened, with Liberation Day, there has been really a shift of capital globally. I think investors are looking for a greater alternative than the US dollar. And Singapore, by being very open, despite the fact that they are also very vulnerable to global fund flows, have actually benefited. And this is really because we believe Singapore is a defensive anchor, and it's only been strengthened in these recent years by its strength and its virtue. So I think what we have seen in the last 2 months, we have actually seen a lot more capital coming to Singapore. And in a world that is searching for capital preservation, searching for inflation protection and reliable yields, Singapore stands out. One may observe that today in Switzerland, another safe haven economy, interest rates are already negative. In Hong Kong, interest rates are near zero. So I think the hunt is on, and I think Singapore dollar and Singapore-based investments will be getting more renewed interest from the global investor. And I think that's actually been a very strong attribute for Singapore. One final thing to mention also is its dividend yield. I think Singapore has actually been also growing its dividend over the past 5 to 10 years. I remembered, 10 years ago, the Singapore dividend was probably closer to 3 or 4%. But today, Singapore dividend yields are actually almost double for what they were 10 years ago. And this is also interesting because the market is also at its all-time high. So can you imagine dividend yields rising, and yet with an all-time high index is actually at its highest point? So that really tells you how dividend growth has actually been also a very important contribution to Singapore's return. So we like the dividend appeal for Singapore, and we are quite excited about that going forward.
Then for investors, watching this and thinking, how do I get on this? What are some practical ways for them, to gain exposure to Singapore's next phase of growth there?
We coined this term New Singapore, and if I can continue to elaborate what New Singapore means for us, it's really the evolution of the economy towards innovation, services, and corporate transformation. Companies that are restructuring and actively modernizing themselves to compete in this time of deglobalization and global growth. So we think there are certain sectors that typify what we call New Singapore. We are constructive on this sectors such as technology services, data centers, healthcare, logistics, and even tourism as well as consumer services. And we consider this whole New Singapore narrative to be really long-term drivers for growth that will really outpace the broader economy. So it's really about investing in the New Singapore Inc. Opportunities we like today, particularly in Singapore, is infrastructure and utilities. We think that these companies are well positioned. One of the our favorite areas of focus has been really on renewable energy. And renewable energy really comes from what we call transition. And many companies are decarbonizing, they are moving towards green financing. And we find that there are quite a few opportunities in Singapore to invest in these trends. So we are actually quite excited about these New Singapore sectors, especially in SG60.
As we wrap up this, do you have any final message to investors, as we celebrate Singapore's 60th, and any forward-looking message that you have? Yeah.
I think we are really proud of Singapore as we celebrate SG60. We are also very constructive on the Singapore equity market, which actually exemplifies what we consider to be very important for us in investing. Number one, what we like to invest in are companies with sustainable growth or sustainable returns that are high, and one that also has positive change. And we think that Singapore offers really both. We're giving investors the really underappreciation of positive change, as well as growth that are really improving going forward. So we think about SG60 and Singapore today as really picking the next success story for Singapore Inc. or the future blue chips of Singapore. So we actually are very happy, especially when you celebrate SG60.
Well said, Kenneth. So SG60 is not just a celebration of the past, it's also a launch pad for what's next to come. Is that right, Juliana?
Yes, Marcus, you're right. And then thank you again, Kenneth, for sharing your perspective. And thank you once again to our viewers for joining us in this very special SG60 episode. That's all we have. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.